everyone, thanks for clicking on today's video. My name is Sissy and I love arts and crafts and sharing my silly thoughts on random things. In addition to enjoying the occasional glass of wine, I've always admired the fun crafts one can make from corks. I think they are super versatile and have a fun look to them. Also, because I sometimes hear about a cork shortage, or maybe it was like we were running out of corks or that they're difficult to produce or something. I don't remember, but I feel like I shouldn't throw the corks away and upcycle them instead. I've always loved the look of a cork mat, so that's what I am attempting in today's background video. With an ever so slight give to the corks and a nice natural look to them, I think they would make a super cute, stylish mat for the bathroom. The problem is you need a lot of corks in order to make it happen. Finally, after nearly a decade of collecting, I am proud to say I have enough corks. I think. Hopefully. We shall see. For the materials, I have corks, a glue gun with glue sticks, an X-Acto knife, although looking back, probably a sharp kitchen knife would have been much better and safer, so please don't follow my dangerous cutting technique that you'll see here, and non-slip shelf liner. When you get right down to it, this is probably the most expensive thing in my house when you think about the amount of wine I had to purchase and consume, though I'm not complaining about that part. This mat better be spectacular. I looked at a few tutorials, and a lot of people suggested steaming the corks in order to soften them, expand their pores, and make them easier and less messy to cut. I boiled the natural corks instead of the faux corks, but towards the end, I noticed I had accidentally put one of the fake corks into the steamer, and it was so easy to slice, so I should have just done that from the beginning. And the corks gave off a lovely mulled wine scent, which was really pleasant. The corks were more difficult to cut than I anticipated, although, like I said, with the once fake cork that got into the real mix, if I had let them all steam for a long time and made sure their spa bath took its time, I probably would have gotten straighter, better cuts. Hot gluing the things to the mat were a piece of cake, although I did enlist the help of my husband after a while because it can get tedious. As you can see, the fake corks were considerably smaller than the real corks, which is really interesting, and I'm not sure if that's because of the steam expansion or if that's just the case. So my pattern did go off a few times, but I personally don't mind. For those of you who do, I apologize. And yes, the pieces are not as straight as they could be, but I really like the way this mat came out. The cutting was the most difficult part, but overall the craft was fun to do. I was curious about what cork really is, and did you know that cork is the bark that comes from a specific kind of oak tree and that they are mainly grown in Portugal? I thought that was super cool. Basically, to get the cork, the trees are essentially shaved of their bark, which doesn't harm them at all, and it's harvested from those big strips. It's like giving the tree a haircut or a wax job. According to Wikipedia, I know you aren't supposed to use it for most academic settings, but we're here on YouTube, people. The majority of these trees are, like I said earlier, produced in Portugal, but are also produced in Spain, Italy, and Algeria. Honestly, it fits considering the times I see the most cork is in wine bottles, and I associate these countries with wine. What I also thought was super cool is that allegedly, 68% of all cork production goes to wine bottle stoppers. I'll leave the link below if you want to check out the ever reliable wiki page. But how incredibly cool is that? I'd love to go to one of these places someday. I think it'd be super cool to watch the cork production process, and I absolutely love tours of factories, really any place where something is made. It's my favorite date night activity, and fortunately, my husband enjoys it too. That show, How It's Made, has been one of my favorites for years. But back to the cork mat, overall it was a fun and enjoyable craft and a great way to upcycle corks. I hope you enjoy the background video. Today's topic is the third part in the RV trip series. Today is the third video in my series of talking about RV trips with my family when I was a kid. I absolutely loved our RV trips, even through all the ups and downs. And looking back, I have very fond memories, and I'm so happy that I was given the opportunity to travel with my family around our country. I know that the US is messed up, extremely messed up, and it needs so much work. But I do have to say that one thing I do love about this country, and one of the things, if not the only thing it does well, is be diverse. Across every state line, you can find some things unique to each and every state, and the people of each state embody the state itself, and that's one of the things I love about the trips we took. Yes, you can fly to the different states and check them out, but I feel like you get a real feel for each state when you stop at the random mom and pop restaurants and truck stops along the way. I honestly believe that our family road trips were what inspired me to get my undergrad degree in anthropology. People are what make a place, and I feel like you can get a lay of the land and the culture of the area from the people, and I love that. As an adult, I aspire to take my husband on road trips around the country in the future if I can encourage him to live in a small recreational vehicle for a while. I have to teach him how to empty out tanks and speak to truckers, and I haven't yet convinced him to do this. I hope I can talk him into driving an RV soon. As a kid in our family RV, my brothers and I would find all sorts of cool things that we wouldn't have necessarily discovered in our suburban home. I remember the campsites in particular were very unique, and almost every single one was different and had their own personalities, if you will. Some places, like the chain KOA, were very similar no matter the campsite you went to. They were pretty middle ground, with most of them having dirt sites to back the RV into, and would typically come with basic hookups that included water, electricity, and sewer, and a picnic table. If you were lucky, you got a site with a tree on it for some shade. You also typically have a clubhouse that, depending on the season, would have activities, and if you got a good space, you could potentially be close to the bathrooms that are pretty decent stalls and showers with warmish water. KOA campgrounds are pretty good but pricey, so we wouldn't always stay at them. The nice thing was, we knew what we were getting into when we stayed at a KOA. If we went to a privately owned campground, for example, we wouldn't always include it. It's pretty standard for campgrounds to have community bathrooms and bare basic amenities, but that wasn't always the case. Typically, when we were traveling, we wouldn't look ahead for a campground and make a reservation or anything. The reason why was because we weren't sure how long we would be driving. Weather, traffic, and how my dad, including what his work week looked like, as he did or does work remotely, but he has to have time to work, all had an impact on our driving schedule. Therefore, what we would typically do is my mom would ask my dad where he wanted to stop on the map. Keep in mind, our maps were still paper at this time. And my mom would look around on the map for a place. In those days, before we went on any trip, we would order what AAA called a triptych, which was a paper map with info on it, like gas stations, restaurants, and RV parks to help us plan our trips. So she would pass the triptych to me and my brothers, and we would help to find an RV park close by. If we didn't see one on the map, we would also keep an eye out on the road for a place. Usually, one of us would shout we found one out the window or on the map, and my dad would decide if it was close enough to the freeway to stop. Then my mom would call and ask if there were any availability at the location. I think some of the best places were the privately owned resorts. I remember there was this one place that we loved to stop, although we didn't do it often because it was so expensive, like $250 a night back in the early 2000s, which was a lot even for a regular hotel room, let alone an RV campsite, that not only had an on site restaurant, but it had concrete spaces for the RV so no one got dirty, a picnic table, and a hot tub at every space. I think that resort even had internet hookups at the time, which would have been a really big deal back then. Obviously, that was a fan favorite. I remember the community bathrooms at the park being absolutely incredible, so yeah, it was nice. I think that campground was in Arizona. I wonder if it's still around. I don't know. I remember we stopped at a random RV park in, was it Louisiana maybe? I remember that park being kind of eerie. It was nice, it was well kept, but it was very woodsy and somehow just too quiet, if you know what I mean. My brothers and I got out at the campground to explore because we had gotten there kind of early, like around 5ish. We started walking around and came across this pond. My little brother talked about trying to fish because he had his little kid-sized fishing rod, but I noticed a sign that said, "Do not fish or swim, toxic waste." That was interesting. I kind of panicked to force my brothers to leave, and we went and told my mom. She was like, "Well, just don't get too close." So we decided to take a walk in the woods, and my mom joined us. At first, everything seemed fine. I was a little on edge, but I've always been cautious. One of my brothers was skipping through the leaves, and the other two were sticking close to my mom. All of a sudden, I feel like I've stepped on something really hard, and I thought it was a rock, and I looked down. It was a deer jawbone. My brother thought it was the coolest thing, and my mom was like, I don't know if you should be touching that. My brother picked it up, and I immediately started to panic. I thought there might have been wolves in the woods, and I darted my eyes around thinking I heard them howling in the distance. I wanted to immediately go back to the RV as it was already past dusk and getting quite late, and my dad was setting up camp. My mom and brothers brushed it all off as nothing, and my brother took the bone back to the RV to show my dad. I was an absolute wreck. I like to think that I'm adventurous, but I'll admit I really am not, as I tend to be extremely cautious. That bone had been picked clean and was very white at this point, so it was probably quite old, and looking back, I'm sure we were in no danger. But at the time, I was terrified. That was a fun mini adventure, though. In addition to the campgrounds, we would often have a time driving through different areas purely because of the size of the RV. Again, back in those days, Google Maps wasn't a thing, and we had to figure out what places we could and couldn't drive through. On our printed maps, there would occasionally be spots that there might be a note saying low hanging bridge, be warned, or something like that. But for the most part, we had to figure things out for ourselves. I remember the first time we drove through Houston, Texas, for example. That city is absolutely bonkers, and the freeways are crazy. So many turns and so many bridges, and the freeways intersecting. That first time we drove through, I remember my dad remarking that he noticed the big trucks had suddenly disappeared. Now, as an RV, we tended to follow the 18-wheeler trucks because they were not much bigger than us, and we figured if they can drive somewhere, so can we. I remember hearing my dad say that, and I looked out the window, and we all figured out why there were no longer the big rigs. The amount of freeways winding in and out of each other, and the bridges going from various heights that were questionable to fine, and the windy ways were just crazy. It was one of those moments where we were all questioning whether we would make it out of that ridiculously crazy city. We quickly learned that if we see trucks all going a specific way to avoid an exit, a place, or even an entire city, we would follow. Since that time, we learned that even though it took a little longer, it was worth it to drive around Houston rather than through it. I remember another time when we were driving through the mountains. I don't remember where, but I feel like it was northerly, like maybe North Nevada or something. There was nothing specifically labeled on our map, so we were just plugging along on this steep mountain road. Those one lane on each side roads, and you have a steep mountain on one side and even steeper drop on the other. Yeah, it's a little harrowing. All of a sudden, we come to what looks like a narrow tunnel through the mountain, but it's okay. It's more than 16 feet tall. We just make it. We get to another one. Again, it's fine, but my dad is visibly nervous and saying how he wished he knew what the tunnels were like on this road. Then we get to a third one. This time, my dad slowed to a complete stop before the entrance to the tunnel. There was no one else on the road, so we were fine. It was cold, it was drizzly, and even if he couldn't fit, there was no way my dad would have been able to turn the massive RV around. We look at the clearance. It was, I don't remember if we had to clear 16 or 18 feet, but either way, we would only have been able to fit through the tunnel if we drove straight down the middle because it was curved. My dad said that if we stayed on our side of the road, we would get stuck and not clear the tunnel. I remember he and my mom went back and forth on what to do, and for my young child brain, it felt like forever. It was probably only a few moments because we were on a road and couldn't stay stopped for long. So, my dad decided to take a risk. He couldn't turn around, the road was too narrow, plus, the last two tunnels were a miracle that we had made it through. Yes, there could be more up ahead, but that was the risk we had to take. So my dad turned on the hazards and decided to drive very slowly and carefully down the middle of the tunnel, praying that no other cars would come through. Then we would all get stuck. My mom used to play this game with us where she would say, "Suck it in, hold your breath." We children naively thought this would make the RV skinny and we would fit wherever we were going. So we kids held our breath as we drove through that tunnel to help my dad drive through it because obviously that would help. Miraculously, no other car appeared and we made it through the other side. Also, that was the last tunnel through the mountains on that road, thankfully. We did not take that route ever again. I remember another time my dad was trying to do a U turn in a busy city, and we went down this cul de sac where we got stuck. We had a tow car at this time. So I hopped out and disconnected the SUV from the RV, and my dad continued to drive the RV, and I followed in the SUV. I could drive at this point, obviously, until we found a place where we could hook up again. I think that happened more than once. Anyway, I actually have more stories to share, but I think I will end my RV series here. I have such amazing, incredible memories from our times on that road that I do believe that they affected my adulthood. Sometimes I think it'd be cool to own a campground or an RV or something like that. There's so many cool and interesting places to see and interact with, and for all of its flaws and bizarre things going on, this country does have a lot of richness and uniqueness, and that I think everyone should experience. I remember in college, I used to talk about how I really wanted to find out more about our own country, while other anthropology majors wanted to go to Africa and Asia and Europe. Don't get me wrong, I totally want to go to those places too, and there's nothing wrong with wanting to explore them. I've been to some of these places, but certainly not all. But I think there's just so much to explore right here in our own backyards as well, and shouldn't be quickly dismissed. Anyway, this ends my RV trip series. I truly hope you enjoyed listening to them as much as I enjoyed sharing them. I would absolutely love to hear about any memorable trips you took with family or friends, whether it's by land, air, or sea, or I don't know, whatever else, dirigible, rocket. Let me know in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed this video and thank you so much for listening. Please like and subscribe. Have an amazing day, and I'll talk to you again soon.